The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus said to his disciples, "Be watchful, be alert. You do not know when the time will come. It is like a man traveling abroad. He leaves home, a gatekeeper, to be on the watch. Watch, therefore. You do not know when the Lord of the house is coming, whether in the evening or at midnight or at cockcrow or in the morning. May he not come suddenly and find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to all, watch." The Gospel of the Lord.
At the beginning of this Advent season, we're always mindful of the twofold coming of Christ, preparation for Christmas, Christ who's already entered into the world and into time. We're also mindful of Christ's second coming at the end of all time, when he comes on that day of judgment and gives us the resurrection of our bodies as well. For most of us, probably, we're also mindful of Christ coming at the end of our lives, which falls well between the first coming of Christ and hopefully well before the second coming of Christ as well. We're mindful of how we live our lives out, and at the end we meet our Lord, we face God in judgment, and then he brings us into heaven as well. And so the admonition and the advice from Jesus in today's gospel is to be watchful and to be alert. And that applies in some ways, of course, for the second coming of Christ, although I'm not sure we really need to watch too much for that since we don't know when that's going to happen. But the idea of being watchful and being alert in the spiritual life as well. It's not just about the end of our lifetime or the end of the world, but I think it's a good spiritual technique for us always to be watchful and to be on the alert for temptations to sin. I think sometimes in our lives, temptation sneaks up on us. Sometimes it's a bit of a surprise. Maybe you're driving down the road and someone cuts in front of you and all of a sudden you're ready to be angry. Or maybe somebody you hadn't seen for a while, you have a grudge against that person, and all of a sudden you see them and you're ready to be impatient with the person. Or maybe you weren't thinking about this, but somebody gives you an opportunity to gossip and talk about somebody else. Sometimes temptation and sin catches us a bit by surprise. We're not quite sure how to react. But I think many times in our life, it doesn't catch us by surprise, meaning that we know before we go into a situation that this is a difficult situation for me, or this is a difficult person for me to be around. And I've been impatient and short with this person before, and it's probably going to happen again. So it's no surprise that when I have to see this person in my life, that it may happen again. And so we need to be watchful and to be alert. And it's just a simple technique in the spiritual life to kind of steel yourself, to strengthen yourself a bit going into those situations, knowing that it's going to be a little bit harder for you to resist the temptation to sin. Maybe just some examples, some situations. And again, these don't apply to all people and in all times. You have to look at what your temptation is. What's difficult for you to overcome may not be difficult for me, and vice versa. I have no problem I never get angry on the road driving. You can cut me off in front of me, take my parking space. I just don't care. It doesn't bother me one bit. I never get angry when I'm driving. However, that's not the sin of some other people, and I have other things that are temptations for me that may not be temptations for you. And so look at what it is your temptation is, what's difficult for you in certain situations, and be ready before you get into it. For example, know that the holidays are coming up again. We're just kind of finishing a holiday weekend right now. And maybe you're tempted to have more food and more drink than what you need or what you should have. And you've been warned. You know this is going to happen. You know there may be a good string of Christmas parties coming up in the next month or so, culminating in Christmas Day and New Year's as well. And so you know that you can't overeat, that you can't overdrink. You know not to have too much. And that if you can't contain yourself by yourself, well, then you seek help from somebody, from your spouse, from family members, from friends. Don't let me go for seconds. Don't let me get a second or third or fourth drink. And so you know you need to be watchful if that's your temptation, to too much food or too much drink. You know that there are some people, some relatives, and maybe some in-laws who are difficult people for you. Maybe they're self-centered. Maybe there are certain topics that you can't talk about with them. Maybe they're always negative in their attitude. Maybe they try to draw you into gossip about others. Maybe they're greedy, they never share, and that kind of grates on you in some ways. Maybe they know how to push your buttons or the buttons of your family members. Well, you know that going into those situations with some difficult relatives and in-laws and other people. And so you know you need to be extra patient, extra calm. You know that there are certain topics you may not be able to talk about with them, and that's okay. You know that going in, it's not going to catch you by surprise. Be watchful. Be alert for those temptations. You know that maybe this month you might be tempted towards greediness, to greed and not sharing with others, to wanting to have more things for yourself, especially if financially the year and the month has been difficult for you. You know you may not be quite so open to being kind and generous to the poor and to your charities, to places where you normally give money. Well, you know that going into this month. So you know you need to set whatever it is aside to make sure you have money for those who are poor, for the charities that you support, for things like that as well. You know that going into this month, that money is going to be difficult as you look possibly to buy gifts for family and friends. Be watchful, be alert. Don't let that greediness catch up to you. Maybe work is one of your biggest temptations to sin. I think it's one of the hardest places for people to live a good Christian life and to bring their religion is into their workplace. Maybe it's taking things from work. Maybe it's you're drawn into gossip about other people. Maybe there's a certain amount of laziness at work during the day or during the week. Maybe you mistreat the ones below you, or maybe you're just simply belligerent towards bosses and the ones who are above you. Or maybe it's the commute, the drive to or from work, which is an occasion of sin for you. Okay? You know that going in. You know you need to be extra watchful and extra alert because at work, that's one of your greatest temptations to sin. Or maybe it's a sin of lust. Maybe during these times of the holidays, for some people a little bit more depression, a little bit more sadness, a little more despair, or more tension or stress, or whatever the trigger for all that might be. So you know that during this time and during these days, you need to be especially careful. You need to be alert, to be watchful. Maybe it's the sin of lying, not telling the truth. Maybe it's you're afraid to talk to certain people about certain things. Talk to your parents about grades, you're quick to lie about that. Or quick to lie about your boyfriend or your girlfriend or where you've been. Or maybe you're afraid simply to talk to your spouse or to be honest and truthful with your boss, whoever it might be. So you know that on those certain topics, in certain situations, you need to be extra ready to tell the truth, to be able to say what's going on in your life, and as fearlessly as possible. Be watchful, be alert. I think the advice that Jesus gives in the gospel, it's just wise for us as Christians. Elsewhere, he tells his disciples, I send you as sheep among wolves. He tells them what to bring on their journey, what not to bring. He prepares them well beforehand, before they encounter difficulties, about what's going to happen. Part of our lives, as we've lived a few years now, all of us, we know what situations and what people are difficult for us. It's not so much a surprise anymore. In general, we're not running into new sins. It's pretty much the same sins and the same people and the same situations we run into. And so you know, going into some situations, to be ready, to be a little stronger, to be more patient, to hold your tongue, to be a little bit more calm, and maybe even to pray before going into those situations and seeing certain people. In all this, I don't think we should be too scrupulous in watching ourselves. Don't obsess about these kinds of things, and don't be too hard on yourself when you fall. You ask for forgiveness and move on. And while it's a good idea for us as much as possible to avoid the near occasions of sin, some near occasions, situations and people we can't avoid forever. Some of them we may live with, and some of them we may interact with on a daily basis. It's good as much as possible then in the spiritual life to be watchful and to be alert.